the boy who fixed the church bell. The bell tower stood silent that summer, and folks in Millbrook said it was a bad sign. No bell meant no calling people to worship, no warning when storms rolled in from the west, no celebration when babies came into the world. The silence sat heavy on the town like wet wool on a hot day. Tom Miller lived in a shed behind the blacksmith shop. His daddy had died fixing wagon wheels when Tom was just 7, and his mama followed 2 winters later from the fever. Now at 19, Tom worked with his hands, fixing anything people brought him. Clocks, plows, broken chairs, leaking pots. He had a gift for understanding how things worked, how pieces fit together, how to make the broken whole again. But the preacher's daughter, that was different. Sarah Grace stood in the church doorway every Sunday in her white dress, her dark hair pinned up proper, and Tom couldn't fix the way his heart hammered when she smiled at the congregation. She was educated, read books from the city, played piano like an angel. And Tom? He couldn't even afford a Sunday shirt without patches. The bell had been silent for 3 months when Preacher Davis made his announcement. He stood on the church steps that Sunday morning, his voice carrying across the dusty square where folks gathered after service. "The bell tower needs a man brave enough to climb it," he said. "The mechanism is broken, rusted through. We've had 3 men from the city look at it. Each one said the same thing. Too dangerous. The whole tower might come down. They want $800 to rebuild it from scratch. $800. Might as well have been $8,000. Millbrook was a poor town, and the war had taken most of the young men and their wages with them. The collection plate barely covered the preacher's living anymore." Tom stood at the back of the crowd, his hands shoved in his pockets, his hair still damp from washing in the creek that morning. He watched Sarah Grace standing beside her father, her face sad. She loved that bell. Everyone knew it. When she was little, she'd made her daddy let her pull the rope every Sunday, laughing as the bronze voice sang out over the valley. "If no one can fix it by harvest time," Preacher Davis continued, "we'll have to sell it for scrap. Use the money to keep the church roof from caving in." A murmur went through the crowd. Sell the bell? The bell that had rung in this town for 70 years? The bell that had called their grandparents to worship, that had tolled for every funeral, that had celebrated every wedding? Tom felt something stir in his chest. Something foolish and desperate and probably stupid. But he'd been poor his whole life, and poor men didn't get anywhere by playing it safe. He pushed through the crowd, his boots kicking up dust. People turned to look at him. Tom Miller, the mechanic boy, the orphan who lived in a shed. What did he want? "I'll fix it," Tom said. Preacher Davis looked at him, surprised. The preacher was a good man, fair and kind, but even he couldn't hide the doubt in his eyes. "Son," 3 trained engineers from the city said, "it can't be done safely." "They were looking at it wrong," Tom said. His voice came out stronger than he felt. "I've been watching that tower every day for 3 months. I know what's wrong with it." "You've been watching it?" Sarah Grace spoke for the first time, and Tom's heart did that stupid hammering thing again. Her voice was soft, curious. "Yes, ma'am." Tom looked at her, then quickly back at her father. Couldn't afford to seem forward. "The problem isn't the bell mechanism. It's the support beams. They're rotting from the inside because water's been getting in through a crack in the roof. Fix that first, shore up the beams, then the mechanism is easy." Preacher Davis studied him for a long moment. The crowd had gone quiet, waiting. Finally, the preacher nodded. "All right, Tom Miller. You've got until harvest. But if that tower starts to collapse, you come down immediately. I won't have a death on my conscience." Tom felt a rush of relief and terror all mixed together. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." Sarah Grace smiled at him then, a real smile that reached her eyes, and Tom thought maybe dying in a bell tower wouldn't be the worst way to go. Tom started work the next morning before the sun came up. He'd spent the whole night lying awake in his shed, planning every step, thinking through every problem. The tower was 60 feet tall, built from hand-hewn oak and rough stone. Beautiful in its way, but deadly if you didn't respect it. He borrowed a ladder from the mill, carried it across town on his shoulder. His arms ached, but he didn't care. The church sat on a small hill at the edge of town, white paint peeling, the tower rising up like a finger pointing at God. Tom set up the ladder, checked it twice, then started climbing. The morning air was cool, smelled like honeysuckle and creek water. Birds sang in the trees around the church. It was peaceful, and Tom let himself imagine for just a moment what it might be like to have a real life. A wife, maybe. Children. A house instead of a shed. Foolish thinking. He pushed it away and kept climbing. The roof of the church was steeper than it looked from the ground. Tom had to move carefully, testing each foothold. The tower entrance was a small door, swollen shut from humidity and neglect. Tom wedged his pry bar into the gap and pushed. The door groaned, resisted, then suddenly gave way. Tom stumbled backward, caught himself just before sliding off the roof. His heart hammered. That was stupid. One mistake and he'd be dead before breakfast. Inside the tower, the light was dim and golden, filtering through cracks in the walls. Dust floated in the air like tiny stars. The bell hung in the center of the space, massive and silent, covered in bird droppings and spiderwebs. The bronze was dark with age, but Tom could see the beauty underneath. He looked up at the support beams. Just as he'd thought. The main beam had a crack running through it, hidden behind the bell mechanism. Water damage, rotting from the inside out. If anyone had tried to ring that bell, the whole thing might have come crashing down. Tom spent that first day just looking, measuring, making notes on a scrap of paper with a bit of charcoal. He needed to understand every part of the problem before he started fixing anything. His daddy had taught him that a man who rushes into a repair usually makes two problems out of one, his daddy used to say. When he finally climbed down that evening, his muscles were trembling from tension and his throat was dry as dust. He stopped at the church well to drink, splashing water on his face and neck. How does it look? Tom jumped, turned. Sarah Grace stood a few feet away, holding a basket covered with a cloth. She must have walked soft as a cat because he hadn't heard her coming. It's bad, Tom admitted, but fixable, I think. She smiled at that. Daddy said you'd be honest about it. She held out the basket. Mama sent dinner. Said you probably forgot to eat. Tom took the basket, stunned. Inside was fried chicken, biscuits, green beans, and a slice of apple pie. More food than he usually ate in 2 days. I can't take this. You have to, Sarah Grace said. Mama insists. She says if you're going to risk your neck for the church, the least we can do is feed you proper. Tom didn't know what to say. People in Millbrook were kind enough, but nobody had ever gone out of their way for him before. He was just the poor mechanic boy, always on the edge of things, never quite part of the town. Thank you, he managed finally. Tell your mama I'm grateful. Sarah Grace didn't leave. She stood there, looking up at the tower, her face thoughtful. Do you really think you can fix it? I have to, Tom said simply. If I don't, they'll sell it. That's not what I asked. Tom looked at her then, really looked at her. She wasn't just beautiful. She was sharp, paying attention, asking the real question under the polite one. I think so, he said. But it's going to take time and luck and probably some parts one can't afford. What kind of parts? New oak beams, iron bracing, rope for the bell pull, tools I don't have. Tom shrugged. I'll figure something out. Sarah Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said, the ladies' auxiliary has some money set aside for church repairs. I'll talk to them. I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's paying for work. Her voice was firm. You're saving this church a lot of money by not hiring those city engineers. The least we can do is provide materials. Tom wanted to argue, but the truth was he needed help. Pride wouldn't fix the bell. All right, he said. Thank you. She smiled again, and this time it felt like sunshine after a long rain. Then she turned and walked back toward the parsonage, her white dress glowing in the evening light. Tom stood there holding the basket, feeling like maybe, just maybe, his luck was changing. The next morning, Tom went to see old Jacob at the sawmill. Jacob was 80 if he was a day, bent and gnarled like an ancient tree, but his mind was still sharp and he knew would better than anyone in 3 counties. Need your advice, Tom said, finding the old man sitting on his porch, smoking his pipe. Jacob squinted at him. About that bell tower, I reckon. How'd you know? Whole town's talking about it. Tom Miller's going to kill himself trying to be a hero. Jacob sucked on his pipe. What do you need? Tom explained about the support beams, the water damage, the rot. Jacob listened without interrupting, his eyes half closed. When Tom finished, Jacob was quiet for a long time. Finally he said, You're right about the beams. But replacing them while the bell's still hanging? That's a job for 3 men, not 1 boy. I don't have 3 men. Then you'll die. Tom felt cold despite the summer heat. There has to be a way. Jacob studied him. Why are you doing this, boy? Really? Tom could have lied. Could have said something noble about the church, about the town, about tradition. But old Jacob had a way of seeing through lies, so Tom told the truth. Because I'm tired of being nobody. Because I want to be the kind of man who can walk up to Preacher Davis and ask to court his daughter without getting laughed out of the county. Ah! Jacob nodded slowly. Sarah Grace. Yes, sir. That's honest, at least. Jacob tapped his pipe against the porch rail, knocking out the ash. All right, I'll help you. But you do exactly what I say when I say it. No improvising. No taking chances. Agreed. Tom felt hope rise in his chest. Agreed. Good. Now listen. The trick is you don't replace all the beams at once. You do it one at a time using temporary supports. It'll take longer, but you'll live through it. For the next hour, Jacob explained the process, drew diagrams in the dirt with a stick, made Tom repeat everything back until he had it memorized. By the time Tom left, his head was spinning with information, but he felt more confident. He could do this. With Jacob's knowledge and his own hands, he could actually do this. Tom spent the next week working from dawn until dark couldn't see anymore. He installed temporary braces, carefully jacking up the weight of the bell so he could remove the first rotted beam. It was slow, terrifying work. Every creak of the wood made his heart stop. Every shift in the structure made him freeze, waiting to see if the whole thing would collapse. But it held. By the end of the week, he had the first new beam in place, solid oak that Jacob had helped him select from the mill's stock. The ladies' auxiliary had come through with money for materials, and Tom had been careful with every penny, making sure nothing was wasted. Sarah Grace came by most evenings, bringing food from her mother. Sometimes she'd stay and talk while Tom ate, sitting on the church steps in the cooling air. She'd ask about the work, and Tom would explain what he'd done that day, surprised at how easy it was to talk to her. You're good at explaining things, she said one evening. Most men talk down to women, like we can't understand anything complicated. Tom laughed. My mama was smarter than my daddy. She could figure out why a clock wasn't working just by listening to it. I learned early that being a woman didn't mean being stupid. Sarah Grace looked at him with something warm in her eyes. I like that about you, Tom Miller. His heart did that hammering thing again, but this time it felt good. Then Marcus Webb came to town. Tom heard about him before he saw him. Marcus was from the city, educated, rich. He'd come to Millbrook to invest in the new railroad spur that was being planned. He stayed at the boarding house, wore fancy suits, had money to throw around. And he'd taken one look at Sarah Grace and decided he wanted her. Tom saw them together for the first time on Sunday. Marcus sat in the front pew, his dark suit perfectly pressed, his hair slicked back with pomade. After the service, he stood on the church steps talking with Preacher Davis, and Sarah Grace stood beside them, her smile polite but distant. Tom watched from across the square, his stomach churning. He couldn't compete with that. Marcus Webb was everything Tom wasn't. Rich, educated, respectable. The kind of man who belonged with a preacher's daughter. Don't let it bother you, a voice said beside him. Tom turned to find Annie Wright, the baker's daughter, standing there with her basket of rolls. She was a kind girl, always friendly to everyone. Sarah Grace doesn't like him. How do you know? Because I'm a woman and I can tell. Annie smiled. She likes someone else. Tom felt his face heat up. She told you that? Didn't have to. I've got eyes. Annie handed him a roll from her basket. Here. You look hungry. Tom took it, grateful. Thanks, Annie. Just don't give up, she said. Sometimes the best man doesn't win because he stops trying too soon. Over the next few weeks, Marcus became a regular fixture at the church. He donated money for the new hymnals. He helped organize a church picnic. He was always around, always charming, always making sure everyone knew how generous he was. And he made no secret of his interest in Sarah Grace. He'd walk with her after services, bring her flowers from the city, compliment her piano playing. Preacher Davis seemed pleased with the attention. A man like Marcus Webb would be a good match for his daughter. Security, status, a future. Tom watched it all while he worked on the bell tower, his hands aching, his heart heavy. Maybe he'd been foolish to think he ever had a chance. But he kept working, because even if Sarah Grace married Marcus Webb, the bell still needed fixing. The town still needed their bell. The fourth beam was the hardest. It supported the most weight, and replacing it meant basically holding up the entire bell with temporary braces while he worked. Tom spent 3 days just on the prep work, double-checking everything, making sure the supports were solid. Old Jacob came by to inspect his work. The old man climbed up into the tower, moving surprisingly well for his age, and examined every joint, every brace, every measurement. "You've learned well," Jacob said finally. "This is good work, Tom. Real good." Those words meant more to Tom than any amount of money. He'd spent his whole life being the poor orphan boy, the one people pitied but didn't respect. To hear old Jacob, who'd built half the buildings in Millbrook, say his work was good, that was something. "Thank you, sir." "Now the hard part," Jacob said. "You've got to pull that beam out while keeping everything stable. You'll need help. At least 2 strong backs. I'll figure it out." "Tom." Jacob's voice was serious. "This is where men die. Pride kills more workers than accidents. Ask for help." Tom nodded. He knew Jacob was right. But who would help him? Most men in town were busy with their own work, their own families. And he couldn't ask them to risk their lives for free. That night, Sarah Grace came by with dinner as usual. Tom was sitting on the church steps, exhausted, his hands wrapped in bandages where splinters had dug deep. "You're hurt," she said, her voice concerned. "Just splinters. Nothing serious." She sat beside him, set down the basket, and took his hands gently. "Let me see." Her touch was soft, careful. She examined the bandages, then looked up at him. "You need to be more careful." "I'm trying." "Tom." Her voice was quiet. "Why are you doing this alone? Daddy could ask for volunteers. Men would help. It's my job." "That's not an answer." Tom was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Because if I can do this by myself, then maybe I'm worth something. Maybe I'm not just the poor boy everyone pities." Sarah Grace's eyes were sad. "Is that what you think? That people pity you? Don't they?" "No." She said it firmly. "They respect you, Tom Miller. You work harder than anyone in this town. You're honest and kind and skilled. The only person who doesn't see your worth is you." Tom felt something crack open in his chest. He wanted to believe her, wanted it so badly it hurt. "Then why is your father so pleased about Marcus Webb?" The words came out before he could stop them. Sarah Grace's expression shifted, became careful. "My father wants me to be secure, to have a comfortable life. And I can't give you that." "I didn't say that. But it's true." Sarah Grace stood up, and Tom thought he'd ruined everything. But she didn't leave. Instead, she looked down at him, her face fierce. "You want to know what I think, Tom Miller? I think Marcus Webb is boring. I think he talks and talks about himself and never listens. I think he sees me as a prize to win, not a person to know." Tom's heart was hammering so hard he thought she must hear it. "And I think," Sarah Grace continued, her voice softer now, "that a man who risks his life to fix a church bell, who works until his hands bleed, who cares about doing something right even when no one's watching, that man is worth 10 Marcus Webbs." She leaned down, kissed him on the forehead quick and light, then grabbed her basket and hurried away before Tom could respond. Tom sat there in the dark, touching his forehead where her lips had been, feeling like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't fighting this battle alone. The next morning, Tom found two men waiting at the church. Ben Foster, who worked at the mill, and Samuel Hayes, who farmed the land west of town. Both were strong, capable men. "Heard you need help with that beam," Ben said. Tom was surprised. "How'd you hear that?" "Sarah Grace asked us," Samuel said. "Said you were too stubborn to ask yourself. But the job needed doing right." Tom felt embarrassed and grateful all at once. "I can't pay you." "Didn't ask for pay," Ben said. "This is our church too. Our bell. Let's get to work." With 3 men, the job went faster and safer. They worked together, Ben and Samuel taking direction from Tom, all of them moving carefully, methodically. By midday, they had the old beam out and the new one ready to slide into place. "On 3, Tom said. 1, 2, 3. They lifted together, muscles straining, the heavy oak beam rising up into position. To fit perfectly, sliding into the notches Tom had cut. They bolted it in place, tested it, checked everything twice. It held. Ben clapped Tom on the shoulder. "Good work, boss." Tom grinned, dusty and sweating and happier than he'd been in months. "Thank you. Both of you." "Don't mention it," Samuel said. "But you owe us a drink when this is done." "Deal." With the beams replaced and secure, Tom moved on to the bell mechanism itself. This was the part he'd been most worried about. The gears were rusted, the rope was frayed and dangerous. The bronze wheel that the rope ran over was worn down on one side. He took everything apart carefully, laying each piece out on a cloth, cleaning and examining each part. Some could be saved with oil and patient work. Others needed to be replaced. The hardest part to find was the bronze wheel. It was a specific size, cast specially for this bell 70 years ago. Tom spent 2 days asking around town, checking old barns and workshops, looking for anything that might work. Finally, he found it in the most unlikely place. Old Mrs. Henderson, who lived at the edge of town with a dozen cats and a house full of junk, had a bronze wheel hanging on her wall as decoration. "My husband brought that home from the war," she said when Tom asked about it. "Said it came from a church that got burned down. I always thought it was pretty." Tom measured it carefully. It was perfect. "Mrs. Henderson, I need to buy this from you. For the church bell." She waved her hand. "Buy it? Don't be silly. If it'll help fix our bell, just take it. The Lord brought you here for a reason." Tom tried to pay her anyway, but she refused. "Just get that bell ringing again," she said. "I want to hear it before I die." Back at the church, Tom worked late into the night, fitting the new wheel into place, oiling the gears, testing each movement. It was delicate work, requiring patience and precision. One mistake and he'd have to start over. Finally, near midnight, he had it all back together. The mechanism looked good, clean and functional. But he wouldn't know if it really worked until he tried to ring it. That would have to wait for tomorrow. He was too exhausted to trust his judgment tonight. Tom climbed down from the tower, his muscles trembling with fatigue. The moon was high and bright, casting silver light across the church grounds. And there, sitting on the church steps, was Sarah Grace. "You should be in bed," Tom said, surprised. "So should you." She smiled. "I saw the lamp burning in the tower. Couldn't sleep wondering if you were okay." Tom sat beside her, suddenly aware of how dirty he was, how much he must smell like sweat and rust and oil. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to worry you. It's all right." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Marcus asked my father for permission to court me." Tom felt his stomach drop. "What did your father say?" "He said yes." "Of course he did. Why wouldn't he?" Marcus Webb was the perfect choice. Rich, successful, everything a father would want for his daughter. "But I said no," Sarah Grace continued. Tom's head snapped up. "What?" "I told Marcus I wasn't interested. And I told my father that I would choose who I wanted to court. Thank you very much." She laughed softly. "Daddy wasn't happy. Said I was being foolish, throwing away a good opportunity. But I don't care." "Sarah Grace, let me finish." She turned to face him, her eyes serious in the moonlight. I know what people think, that I should marry someone safe, someone respectable, someone who can give me a big house and nice dresses and all the things that are supposed to make a woman happy. Your father's just trying to protect you. I know, but I don't need protection. I need someone who sees me, really sees me. Not the preacher's daughter, not a prize to be won, but me. She reached out and took his hand, dirty and calloused as it was. You see me, Tom Miller. Tom couldn't breathe. I'm nobody. I live in a shed. I don't have anything to offer you. You have yourself. Your kindness, your skill, your determination. The way you care about doing things right, even when it's hard. The way you never give up. She squeezed his hand. That's everything, Tom. He wanted to kiss her so badly it hurt. But he was filthy from work, and she was the preacher's daughter, and there were rules about these things. Instead, he lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. When this bell rings again, he said, I'm going to ask your father if I can court you proper. And if he says no, then I'll ask you anyway. Sarah Grace laughed, bright and joyful in the quiet night. Good answer. Marcus Webb didn't take rejection well. Tom heard the rumors before he saw the man himself. Marcus was telling people that the bell tower was unsafe, that Tom was a fool playing with fire, that someone was going to die because the town was too cheap to hire real engineers. He's trying to turn people against you. Annie warned Tom one morning at the market. Says you're reckless. Tom shrugged. Let him talk. The work speaks for itself. But Marcus wasn't done talking. He went to Preacher Davis directly, brought documents from the city engineers, showed him calculations and safety reports that all said the same thing. The tower was a death trap, and anyone working on it was risking their life unnecessarily. Preacher Davis, torn between his daughter's wishes and his responsibility to the town, called a meeting. The whole town showed up, packing into the church on a Wednesday evening. Tom stood at the front, his hat in his hands, while Marcus Webb laid out his case. I have nothing against Tom Miller personally, Marcus said, his voice smooth and reasonable. But the facts are clear. 3 professional engineers said this tower cannot be safely repaired. We're risking a young man's life out of stubbornness and false pride. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Some people nodded. The city engineers were professionals, after all. What did Tom know? Furthermore, Marcus continued, I'm prepared to donate the full $800 needed to have the tower rebuilt properly by professionals. No risk, no danger, no chance of tragedy. That caused a stir. $800 was more money than most people in Millbrook saw in a year. It was generous. It was safe. It would also mean Tom had failed. Publicly, humiliatingly failed. Preacher Davis looked troubled. Tom, do you have anything to say? Tom stepped forward. His mouth was dry. He'd never been good at public speaking, had never been comfortable with everyone staring at him. But he had to try. Mr. Webb is right about one thing, Tom said. This work is dangerous, but it's not impossible. I've replaced all 4 main support beams. They're solid oak, properly braced, tested under weight. The mechanism is cleaned and repaired with parts that will last another 70 years. But you haven't rung the bell yet, Marcus interrupted. How do you know it works? I don't, Tom admitted. Not for certain. But I've checked every piece, every connection, every gear. I've done this right. You hope you've done it right, Marcus said. But hope doesn't keep people safe. Professional expertise does. Tom felt anger rise in his chest. Those city engineers never even climbed the tower. They looked at it from the ground and said it was too dangerous. They wanted the easy money from a full rebuild. I've been up there every day for 2 months. I know that tower better than anyone. You're a mechanic, not an engineer. I'm a man who fixes broken things. And I fixed this. The crowd was murmuring again, uncertain. Tom could feel the mood shifting. Marcus Webb had money and credentials. What did Tom have? Just his word. Then Sarah Grace stood up. I believe him. Everyone turned to look at her. She walked to the front of the church, stood beside Tom, her chin raised defiantly. Tom Miller has worked harder than anyone I've ever seen, she said. He's been careful and patient and thorough. And more than that, he's done it because he cares about this town, about this church, about all of us. Not for money or recognition, but because it mattered. Sarah, this isn't about belief, her father said gently. It's about safety. Then let him prove it, Sarah Grace said. Let Tom ring the bell. If it works, then we know the repair is good. If it doesn't. She looked at Tom, her eyes fierce with faith. But it will work. I know it will. Preacher Davis looked between his daughter and Tom, clearly torn. Finally, he sighed. All right, tomorrow morning we'll test the bell. If it rings true and safe, then Tom's work is accepted. If there are any problems, any signs of instability, we accept Mr. Webb's generous offer and hire professionals. Marcus Webb didn't look happy, but he nodded. Fair enough. Tom met Sarah Grace's eyes and mouthed thank you. She smiled, small and private, just for him. That night, Tom couldn't sleep. He climbed up into the tower one more time, checking everything by lamplight. The beams were solid. The mechanism was clean and oiled. The rope was new and strong. Everything should work. He sat there in the tower with the silent bell, running his hands over the bronze, feeling the history of it. This bell had rung for births and deaths, for joy and sorrow, for 70 years of life in this town. It deserved to sing again. Please work, he whispered to it, feeling foolish but not caring. Please. Morning came bright and clear. The whole town gathered in the square, looking up at the tower. Tom could see the doubt on many faces, the worry. If the bell fell, if the tower collapsed, people could die. It was his responsibility. Preacher Davis stood with Sarah Grace and her mother. Marcus Webb stood off to one side, his arms crossed, his expression smug. He clearly expected this to fail. Old Jacob was there too, his weathered face neutral but his eyes kind. He gave Tom a small nod. Tom climbed up into the tower one last time. The bell loomed above him, massive and waiting. The new rope hung down, pale and clean against the old bronze. Tom wrapped it around his hands, feeling the rough fiber against his palms. This was it. Everything he'd worked for, everything he'd hoped for, came down to this moment. He pulled. Nothing happened. Tom's heart sank. He pulled again, harder. Still nothing. The mechanism wasn't engaging. Something was wrong. Something he'd missed. Then he heard it. A tiny click, metal on metal. The gears were turning, just slowly, fighting against rust that wasn't completely gone. Tom pulled again, putting his weight into it, and suddenly the bell moved. The clapper swung forward and struck bronze. The sound was incredible, deep and pure, and so loud Tom felt it in his chest, in his bones. The bell rang out across Millbrook, across the valley. The voice that had been silent for months finally singing again. Tom kept pulling, and the bell kept ringing, each strike clean and true. He looked down through the opening in the floor and saw people in the square starting to cheer. Old Jacob was grinning. Sarah Grace had her hands over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Even Preacher Davis was wiping his eyes. Tom rang the bell 7 times, once for each decade it had served the town, then let the rope settle. The last note hung in the air, echoing off the hills, slowly fading. Silence fell. Then everyone started talking at once, excited and joyful. Tom climbed down, his hands shaking with relief and exhaustion. The moment his feet hit the ground, Sarah Grace threw her arms around him. He was too surprised to move, very aware that everyone was watching, but she didn't seem to care. You did it, she said into his shoulder. I knew you would. Tom carefully put his arms around her, holding her while the town celebrated around them. Over her shoulder, he saw Marcus Webb turn and walk away, defeated. Tom felt no joy in that, just relief that it was over. Preacher Davis approached, his expression serious. Tom gently released Sarah Grace, expecting a rebuke for the public embrace. Instead, the preacher held out his hand. That was fine work, Tom Miller. The finest I've seen. Tom shook his hand, stunned. Thank you, sir. I believe, the preacher said carefully, that you wanted to speak with me about something? Tom glanced at Sarah Grace, who was trying not to smile. Yes, sir. I'd like permission to court your daughter. I thought you might. Preacher Davis was quiet for a moment. I won't lie, Tom. I had hoped Sarah would choose someone with more security. But she's a grown woman, and she's made her choice clear. And after watching you work these past months, seeing your dedication and skill, he sighed. You're a good man. You'll do right by her. I will, sir. I promise. Then you have my blessing. The preacher smiled. Besides, Sarah would have courted you anyway. She's got her mother's stubborn streak. Sarah Grace's mother laughed at that, coming forward to hug Tom. Welcome to the family, son. I hope you know what you're getting into. Tom looked at Sarah Grace, at her bright eyes and brilliant smile, and thought he probably didn't know it all. But he couldn't wait to find out. That evening, after the celebration had died down and people had gone home, Tom and Sarah Grace sat on the church steps in the golden light of sunset. The bell tower rose above them, solid and repaired, its shadow long across the grass. What will you do now? Sarah Grace asked. I don't know, Tom admitted. I've spent so long focused on the bell, I haven't thought past it. You could start a proper repair business. The town needs someone like you, and other towns too. Tom considered that. It was a goo.